Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. So this is Dr. Rohin Francis. You are a consultant cardiologist. I've been a huge fan of yours for ages. And I was just saying, I've had quite a lot of women come to me who've had cancer, who've gone down the functional integrative medicine route. Things haven't worked. They spent a lot of money and I don't know a lot about it. And what I've read seems to be very inconsistent. And I saw you put a tweet out about your opinions about functional medicine, kind of the good, the bad and the ugly. And I thought it might be useful just to hear your take on what it is so people can understand where we're coming from as two traditional doctors.
Sure. Well, thanks very much for the invite, and it's a pleasure to speak to you today. Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is it's very much coming from the viewpoint of a so-called, normal, traditional, conventional doctor who is someone who's watched this field grow in popularity. I'm not someone who calls himself a functional medicine practitioner, although I will get to this point. I think I would argue that any good doctor of the conventional stripe actually does embody a lot of the objectives that are sort of mentioned in functional medicine. And that's perhaps one of my first things to say, is that I'm not entirely convinced it is an entity in itself. And I think, as you said, it's kind of, a mix of many things. I think it's poorly defined, and there is a good, bad and the ugly spectrum, because there is much in functional medicine and practitioners of functional medicine which is fantastic, which is absolutely the thing that we should be aspiring to do. But I think the thing that led to those tweets that you mentioned was the increasing amount of pseudoscience and unevidence-based or non-evidence-based therapies and investigations that have flown under the radar under the guise of functional medicine. So it's often referred to as a Trojan horse for a lot of these beliefs. And I think, as you mentioned, there are particularly targeted, maybe not targeted, but susceptible patient groups who tend to go for this, who are those who have a bad experience with conventional medicine, who are poorly served by the normal medical system. And I'm absolutely not pretending that doesn't exist. After your post yesterday, I read some of the comments, and people are having bad experiences with medicine. And I think we have to recognize that too.
Definitely. And I think I was just having a look to see what the alleged pillars of functional medicine are, and 4 different websites gave me 4 different things. But it seems to be a combination of, they address the root cause of an illness, which to me is putting blame on someone. It's your fault you got arthritis or cancer because you led a toxic lifestyle. And it seems to be nutrition and sleep and movement and stress and emotions. And it's like, where is the evidence to say that because you were depressed at 5, it's why you got cancer, and putting that blame on people? And it's almost like saying, good doctors, good traditional medical doctors don't talk about any of that. We don't talk about your mental health or your sleep or exercise or how you are. And it's like you're doing a disservice to a lot of us that do cover these things.
Yeah, and that's exactly my feelings as well. To steel man the argument and to give the best sort of form of functional medicine, it was one of those sets of pillars that I'd read on the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine website. Yeah. And it was something along the lines of considering the patient as a whole, the importance of prevention, the importance of nutrition in development of chronic disease, physical activity, relationships, exercise. I mean, these are all absolutely important things. Nobody would argue against any of that. But as you say, the idea that functional medics are the ones with a monopoly on considering these things important is an insult to a lot of normal doctors who are day-to-day seeing patients. And as I think you made a great point there, which is one that I hadn't initially considered until I read a very good piece in the British Journal of General Practice by academics in the field, not people like me who just kind of mouth off online, talking exactly that, this kind of emphasis placed on personal agency, that these are actions that you have done or I have done to somehow cause this disease. And that is not only a problematic approach to things like cancer, but also there are lots of socioeconomic factors that are simply out of people's control. And to say that you need to address the root cause of inflammation by taking some ice baths and having a sauna, this is not practical information for the majority of patients.
If your parents were on the breadline and you were using food banks because you're a nurse and you can't afford to eat. You can't go and pay for all this stuff. It's like, it's your fault that you're poor or you were a lower social class. I just think that's really wrong. And I've had a couple of people who said they've gone to these doctors, they prescribe these really strict, you know, raw vegan diets, and they're saying, well, if your cancer comes back, it's because you didn't follow the diet hard enough. Mm-hmm. And that really niggles with me.
Yeah, I mean, that's you know, you'll know this far better than me. You know, cardiology, I think we don't always see this much involvement in what was originally called alternative medicine. Yeah. And I think that's the shifting goalposts. You know, lifestyle medicine, functional medicine, often used interchangeably and don't have that same negative connotation. But then integrative medicine is another term which is used interchangeably, and it's integrating complementary and alternative medicine, CAM. That was another rebranding. And there's this constant rebranding of what has always been the same. It's just stuff that is not proven. And I think that's so. But yes, it was, you know, some of my friends who are cardio-oncology specialists I did my PhD research with, they were in the same office. And so their patients were cancer patients. And we would often compare notes about how the different patient populations, you know, often, and one particular friend was specializing in breast cancer. And, you know, particularly emotive diagnoses like that, I think is where you often get people preyed on by some of these people online. Now, again, this is not to suggest that everybody is like this at all. And there are many absolutely fantastic practitioners. And after that, those tweets, I was talking to a friend who's I don't know if this position, but very senior in the British Association of Lifestyle Medicine. And we had a really good chat, you know, and as far as I know, I mean, he's not my doctor, but he's a fantastic, considerate doctor. So I'm not at all trying to tar everyone with the same brush, but there are a lot of people using functional medicine as a label to say, hey, I'm different. You know, I'm not like those regular blinker doctors who are slaves to big pharma. I think about the whole person, and you should buy my supplements, and you should, you know, buy this whatever this therapy,
the diet, the toxin, that You know.
So that's my, I think, one of my key objections.
I think it's so easy when you have a chronic illness. As a doctor, you have so little time. I used to get 10 minutes to tell someone they've got breast cancer, they need a mastectomy, would you like a reconstruction? Oh, you'll have radiotherapy, you're going to need chemo, you're going to be menopausal for 10 years. Bye. We don't have the time to cover everything. And if you've got the time and money to pay someone to help you go through what a healthy, sensible diet should be and sleep, that's fantastic. But it's when they are paying for stuff. And how can you see so much stuff online? It's really hard for someone to say, are you for real? Are you a quack? Do I need to spend the money on all these things? You've got 1 million followers. What you're saying must be true. And I think that's where one of the big problem lies, isn't it?
Well, I think there's no greater evidence how convincing a lot of this stuff is that many medics are taken in by it, and particularly young medics that I see, you know, and we've talked a little bit about social media's effect, and I think there is this kind of glamorous image to functional medicine, that it is this kind of, you know, it's all about lifestyle, and so that has got an oversized effect on social media. So I think a lot of young medics see it as a very interesting kind of field that they don't learn about so much in medical school, and they kind of are attracted by this and think it is offering something different. And I think you're absolutely right that this is one of the big shortcomings of modern medicine. I mean, in the UK, I know you've got viewers from lots of different places, but the GP time slot is 10 minutes. 10 minutes to take a history, examine if necessary, formulate a plan, explain it to the patient, advise treatment, and document everything in 10 minutes. You know, how, and so then if somebody comes away saying, well, the GP didn't talk about my diet and my exercise and my sleep, it's not because that doctor didn't think that's important, but unfortunately, this is the system we work in, and I make no, you know, justification for that, but you can't compare apples with oranges and say that if you go to a private, self-funded, as in you're self-funding, a consultation with a functional medic for an hour, of course they're going to be able to consider these things in more depth. So I think it's a bit unfair to compare, you know, one thing to another. And a lot of, you know, comments I get, most of my viewers are in the US. So, you know, their healthcare system's very different, but also has lots of problems. And I am very sympathetic to people having bad experiences there. And kind of segueing on from that, I think one of the things we haven't mentioned was also often the reliance on a battery of tests.
Yes.
So this is the thing. You should get all your hormones checked. You should get
the urine tests and the sleep tests and the cortisol tests and things that proven by medical science you don't need to test to treat something.
Exactly.
It's just to, you know, give someone money and they'll do tests you don't need.
I mean, some of these are even more wacky. You know, food allergy testing has really never been proven to be of any use.
No.
In a very few sort of select examples. And there's, you know, a whole kind of boring medical statistics lecture to address some of these. But essentially, if you send off 100 tests, something will come back a little bit abnormal. Or, you know, even if it isn't abnormal, functional medical practitioners would often say, well, the key thing is you're an individual. So these normal values are based on the population, but you're special, you're different. And now we're seeing the advent of genetic testing really taking off. And in preparation for this, I thought I'd watch, I just looked up functional medicine on YouTube. And the first match that came up was Mark Hyman, who is essentially the high priest of functional medicine from the Cleveland Clinic, which is a very prestigious hospital in America. And YouTube has this accreditation underneath saying this is from an accredited health source. So it's giving this legitimacy because their Cleveland Clinic, you know, is massive. And it's one of the worst things I've seen in modern, you know, most cynical moves from a hospital is this embracing of a functional medical department headed up by Mark Hyman. And what is in this video, it's only a few minutes long, again, is this kind of Mott and Bailey argument. So everything he says sounds totally reasonable. You know, but if you have a little bit of knowledge in the field, he's saying, you know, we'll send off these genetic tests to individualize your care. Well, there's no evidence for that. You know, you can send off a bunch of DNA tests and your germline DNA, your you know, DNA that you were born with actually has minimal correlation with the kind of diseases that they're talking about. These are diseases of chronic disease, lifestyle related. And you know, the advice that has got evidence is the same kind of unsexy stuff that your doctor will tell you. Eat healthy food, sleep well, exercise. You know, everybody knows these things. But when me as a cardiologist, when I tell people don't smoke and exercise, that doesn't count. But if functional medicine,
I get that. I'm the same. It's like they're confusing epigenetics and genetics, but it's a way of, oh, genetic testing is the latest thing. But you can't find the evidence to show that that test has any impact. And when I'm saying you don't need to drink bicarbonate of soda and turmeric enemas aren't going to cure you, but they're saying, oh, but it's all in the nutrition, it's all the supplements, you've got to do this. The whole sugar causes everything. People don't realize that everything you eat is broken down to sugar, all carbohydrates, all vegetables. It's that kind of, and I get people want a sense of control. If you have a chronic disease and your doctor says, I can't cure it, you're going to have to live with it, I'm really sorry, the drugs have side effects, but you've got these people saying, I can cure you, give me your money, I will do the test, I understand. I get how seductive it can be, but it's really dangerous.
Yeah, I you know, I absolutely sympathize for the many conditions where modern medicine doesn't have a good answer.
It's heartbreaking to treat patients like that, where you know there is nothing you can do.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating for us as practitioners, but obviously orders of magnitude more frustrating for the patient. And I think there is also something to be said with, you know, the fact that we are based in science. So I can't lie to a patient and say a therapy is going to be effective if I can't be sure if it will. I can say, you know, in studies of patients like you, in a population of 100 people, 60% derived a benefit. So I have to phrase it in an honest scientific way. Whereas an alternative medicine practitioner, and you know, again, I think functional medicine has this problem of diluting. You know, there are a lot of bad actors within the umbrella. So again, I'm not saying everybody, but they might say, well, you know, this infrared therapy is guaranteed, to fix things, because your cardiologist, wouldn't have thought of this. And and there's another, they don't send these tests because it's too expensive, or they're in the pocket of the insurance companies. And so, but they can give a very confident prediction that their therapy will work, and potentially that could actually lead to a more powerful placebo effect. Because if I, say something like statins, statins have so much negative press around them that people have their preconceptions before anyone even mentions taking a statin. And I'm sure there are, many treatments like that. Whereas if something sounds kind of experimental, and you hear some anecdotal evidence, and then the practitioner is saying, this is amazing, this is a game changer, then
the secret your doctor is hiding from you, the one thing they don't want you to know.
And perversely, that can actually potentiate a placebo effect. If I give a drug to a patient and give a very, balanced view, they'll be like, whatever. But and they may not derive any kind of additional placebo on top of its active compound. Whereas an alternative medicine practitioner might give an inactive therapy, but actually the patient will feel better via the placebo effect. And again, saying placebo, I never mean it in a pejorative sense. No. It's a powerful thing, but people shouldn't be misled that something is active when it isn't.
And when the evidence isn't there, you go on the websites of people like Dr. Mike Hyman. It's like TripAdvisor. There are glowing testimonials of people saying it's amazing, but you don't know whether they're true. Are they made up? Did he just write them themselves? They're not backed by papers. And most people in the public don't understand how drugs are developed, how trials are developed, how we treat people based on evidence so we don't do any harm. And so much of functional medicine is alternative medicine. The evidence isn't there. And it's how do we make what we're selling sexy? Because it's not. It's that common sense. And the thing I really hate is there's no other branch of medicine where doctors are attacking other doctors. I'm going to say cardiologists don't know what they're doing. Come and see me as a breast surgeon to treat your, angina. But functional medics seem to be saying conventional doctors don't know what they're doing. We're the good guys. And that just goes against the whole principle of medicine, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's something that leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And again, it's not universal, no. but it is, even those who don't outright come out and say that, the very core tenet is that this is something separate. This is different to normal medicine, which is to really sell short what medicine has achieved, And again, I think the lesson that we can take is why is this growing in popularity? What are the things that we can try and address and change? And obviously, there's only so much we can do as individuals. But you've got to think about system-based interventions as well. Public health has made enormous gains through lifestyle modification. I mean, national anti-smoking campaigns and different, nutrition guidelines. For example, less than 50% of the British public eat enough fruit and veg a day. Yeah. And that is, pardon the pun, that is low-hanging fruit. That is really something that we can try and improve. Instead of trying to optimize all these, sending off your selenium and your testosterone. And these are much easier wins that we can try and focus on, but there's not a very, cool way of packaging this. No. And the social media accounts which give that sensible information, they don't really grow in popularity that much. Whereas the ones who are promising these kind of, and it's interesting how there's different silos within this space. So as a guy who's quite into sort of fitness and all that kind of stuff, I particularly follow the bro science kind of corner of the internet, where it's it's very kind of like macho guys sort of trying to invoke science, but there's that old joke of using science like a drunk uses a lamppost for support instead of illumination. So it's kind of, I call it science cosplay. They're using scientific words, but then there's other ones that appeal to a different demographic, which may be more to do with natural or appealing to ancient wisdom. And if you look at the kind of stuff that is under the functional medicine banner of imbalances, it's really a stone's throw from the four humors. It's really just repackaging this belief that has been there since time immemorial, that everything is caused by a sort of imbalance in your lifestyle. And that's not to suggest that there aren't huge lifestyle modifiable factors, but we are already addressing them. You know, it is things like smoking and exercise and weight and all these things. So, you know, I think I agree.
I just hate the fact that so many people are falling prey to people who are selling them stuff they don't need because they don't get, I guess it sounds sexy, it's a new thing. And again, you get people who are on these juicing diets who say, well, that's why I've cured my cancer. Well, actually, you had cancer treatment before you did the juicing diet. And by juicing, you're actually having your fruit and veg a day. So don't spend the money on the books and the supplements and the NutriBullets, just cook the fruit and veg. And it's just that common sense that all medicine is based on.
Sometimes I'm in kind of two minds. Like, I do understand the appeal of, you know, again, I sort of talked about the placebo effect, and, you know, there are ways that there is agency that people can try to harness to make themselves feel better. So if somebody is engaging in conventional evidence-based chemotherapy for their cancer, but they are going to an alternative or functional or lifestyle integrative medicine practitioner as an adjunct, you know, to help them subjectively feel better, say from the nausea caused by the chemotherapy, great, I don't have a problem with that. And that paradigm might suit them. You know, they may respond much better and feel, you know, genuinely feel better going to a Reiki practitioner or something like that. Because that is offering them something that a cold clinic in a NHS hospital is not giving them. So I do, you know, I don't want to say that there's no value in trying different things, but yes, I think, you know, certainly the thing that we would both agree is the cardinal sin is people being misled. You know, people spending their money on things that they are being told are going to work when they're not. And even more dangerous would be replacing evidence-based therapy with these things, which I think is sadly, you know, we see on quite a regular basis. But if somebody comes to me and says, you know, I'm seeing a herbalist for my coronary artery disease, and I'm still taking the medications the hospital gave me too, and as long as the pharmacist has had a look through and happy that there's no crazy interaction or anything, sure, you know, that's fine. So I don't want to, you know, sometimes I think we're in danger of just missing the point a little bit.
I agree.
And being very cynical. And I think that there can be value added, but, you know, it's really got to be as an adjunct.
I think part of it is I didn't realize that cancer patients were desperate to find out what they should eat until I got cancer and went on social media. And as a doctor, I never mentioned what to eat because I thought everyone just knew you eat a normal, healthy diet. And I think there's a bit of all doctors being aware of what patients are looking for to try and help. And we do need to be able to give them that advice so they are saving the money. But I get lots of people saying, is it safe to take Chinese turkey tail mushrooms, or is it safe to take supplements I've never heard of? And when you look at the people selling them, there's always that little disclaimer. Ask your doctor, we can't promise anything, it might not do anything. And they come to me and I've never heard of them. And I think that's a really hard bit when they say, doctor, is it safe to take this? And you have no idea and you don't know what to tell them.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think that's something we need to be better at is saying, I don't know. And, you know, I don't really have any problem saying that to patients when there's no way one person can know everything. So if somebody says, well, I don't know, but I'm happy to try and find out for you and I think, you know, a lot of doctors would say the same. And yeah, you've obviously spoken many times about your experience and how getting a diagnosis that you had previously treated really changed your mindset. And again, you know, those are things that we can do better at as doctors, for sure. And I agree, sort of diet is, you know, I can say to a patient, healthy diet, but then if I actually, and I'm a bit luckier than a GP as a hospital doctor, I get 20 minutes with a patient, so I can take a bit more time. And you know, when you explore people's understanding of what a healthy diet is, actually it's like, whoa, this is really not correct at all. But can they access a dietitian easily on the NHS? Often very challenging. You know, the long waiting lists at the moment for everything. And so where do they go? They turn to the internet, and the first match that comes up is hopefully going to be an accredited source. The NHS does match highly on Google, but you don't have to scroll far before you get something completely, you know.
And there are nutritionists who aren't the same as registered dietitians who say they know what they're doing. I think it's really hard to know who to trust. It really is. And that's where the big guys like Mark Hyman with a huge following seem so seductive, because they must be true because they've got huge followers.
I mean, Mark Hyman, you know, I don't want to focus too much on
no, but it's that
his influence is outsized. It is very much that kind of Mott and Bailey. And what I mean by that is, you know, he'll promote all kinds of quackery and just nonsensical pseudoscience on his social media accounts. But then if you criticize it, you'll get people. So that's, I forget which is the Mott and which is the Bailey. I think the Mott is the weak, the poorly defended one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that, you know, if I say criticize that, then they'll retreat to the fortified castle and say, wait, are you saying that you don't want to consider the patient as a whole? Are you saying that, you know, lifestyle isn't important? It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
No.
I'm saying don't buy this particular thing.
Yeah. And I think, so it's like functional medicine is not a separate medical speciality. All of medicine would love to have the time to talk about sleep and exercise and healthy diet. We just don't have the time.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, how we find a way to help patients get that information sensibly without having to pay through the nose for it and potentially not being ripped off by scams and snake oil.
Yeah, which is the, you know, $64 million question. It's really tough. And, you know, people, with all the kind of science communication stuff that I do, the question I get most often is, you know, how do we know who to trust? And, you know, there's no easy answer. It's really tough. I mean, there are some things that can help. I think there are some basic rules of thumb.
Mm-hmm.
The first is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yes.
You know, I think that's a key one to remember. Then, you know, never trust a single source. Always do a bit of reading around. And, you know, I think when people say I've done my own research, I think that has in itself become kind of a by phrase for leading to a lot of wrong information. But there are some simple steps to do. You know, just start with a simple Google search, look up whatever it is, perineal sunning, and you know, if it sounds like this is maybe something you want to try, just look up and see. You'll find some trustworthy sources that will be able to, and just shop around, look for different people's views. Don't get focused on a single person. Don't focus on one influencer as your source. See what other people are saying, and scientific consensus. You know, if you are able to read scientific publications, great. I mean, most people aren't, and a lot of the time they're paywalled anyway.
I can't half the time. The stats go over my head. I'll be honest.
You know, and who can even access a lot of them these days?
Yeah, exactly.
They're all behind paywalls. But so, you know, most people won't have access to that. But you can still access, you know, sensible news outlets, and there are a lot of fact-checking kind of websites and things like that. And obviously, you know, bodies like the American Medical Association, the NHS, things like that. You just see what other people are saying about a certain thing. And if 95% of scientists and doctors say a certain thing, I would place my money on that.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be that you know. And there's that joke about, you know, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend so and so, and then podcasters going, we need to get that one doctor on the podcast. They know something.
Yeah, I think I'd also say, if they are making you spend an awful lot of money on an awful lot of things, then they're probably trying to make money out of you rather than actually help you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because NHS doctors treat you for free, and we give you all the tests you need to treat you for free. And if someone's saying you've got to get all these tests and pay for all these supplements and do all of these things, you've got to think, actually, if they did work, then the NHS would be giving them to me for free.
Yeah, you know, I think we are very lucky in this country.
Yeah.
And
I think it's different in the States, isn't it? But
it's different in the States. I think in the States, or any private medical system, you are open to a criticism of financial conflicts of interest, which of course these practitioners have as well, which I always find bizarre, that people say, oh, conventional doctors, you are remunerated by drug companies or things like that, and you've got these financial conflicts of interest, but then they're happy to directly pay a functional medicine influencer for what they're offering and don't consider that that's a financial. So I always find that contradiction.
Supplement discount codes and buy this and get 15% off with my code and I'll take the money off the back.
I always find that a strange blind spot. But yes, in the NHS, I can, hand on heart say that I'm paid exactly the same, no matter what, how many stents I put in or don't, how many drugs I prescribe or don't. I don't take any money from the pharmaceutical industry at all. I don't do any private consultations. And, so I think people see financial, it's absolutely reasonable to highlight these things. But I think if somebody is focusing too much on, say, a study saying who is it funded by, rather than actually looking at the methodology of a study and what it showed, but, really saying, well, but this got funding from some drug company, which
that's how drugs get developed to start with,
It's absolutely, it's not a perfect system. But if the methodology, all the data are available, the methodology is sound, the results are clear, then it's not black and white like that you just discount everything, because the alternative is zero evidence. Some of these, particularly I've been really going down a rabbit hole of some of the big medical podcasts and enormous influence, millions and millions of listeners, just saying things like they'll say, and the ones that are very convincing say, well, evidence shows, studies show. So people think there is evidence, and then you go and dig into the study, and it's in 6 mice.
Yes.
And, and they're making these sweeping recommendations based on, or even in vitro. They're in a petri dish.
And I think the thing with podcasts is the hosts. It's like the host doesn't have responsibility to fact check everything the guest is saying. The guest says their spiel, and that gets put into a clip that goes viral on the internet, and it's fact because he said it on a podcast. I don't fact check everything my guests tell me. You kind of assume, you hope they are telling you the truth. And I'm now getting better at, if I say a study shows this, I will put a link to it so you can check and see where I've got my evidence from. I think we need to be pushy and say, you said this, show me the study. I want to find out where this has come from so I know you're telling the truth, and actually make them prove what they're saying is true.
Yeah, and it's essentially an impossible task. This is the sometimes called the fourth law of thermodynamics, the time needed to debunk all the claims in a podcast is, exponentially greater than the amount of time it takes to listen to it. So, a 3-hour Andrew Huberman podcast, it would take me a day to go through all the references and look at everything. So it's impossible. And they produce such volume, almost daily shows sometimes. You can't fact check everything. So again, there's this appeal to authority that by the same token, they will say, well, this doctor is allopathic, this nonsensical word to describe normal medicine, and very focused on their paradigm, not a holistic paradigm, and you shouldn't trust that expertise. So they're kind of rubbishing credentials at one point, but then they are pushing their own credentials as why you should believe them. And they're saying that there's some PhD in whatever, and people are like, oh, this guy's a professor. I mean, surely you've got to believe him. So that is very much just an appeal to authority.
We've got a lot to do.
So I think so. Yeah, I mean, perhaps the take-home message is maybe more for you and I and other healthcare practitioners listening is trying to understand, why these things are so popular, what we can do better in medicine. And how we can try and get better information to patients so that they're not susceptible to a lot of these deceitful promises.
And I think I keep coming back to digital signposting. I used to tell all my patients, don't go on Google because there's some scary shit out there. I'll tell you what you need to know in a pile of leaflets. And it's bullshit because it's the first thing I did. And maybe we create lists of sensible resources to say, right, you need to know about sleeping and eating and your mental health. these are good places to go for sensible advice to help start you on that journey.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, there are lots of good sources out
Yeah.
there, and I think that is absolutely our role to point people in the right direction. I just worry that there is a tsunami of bad information that is almost impossible to combat.
Yeah, I know.
And I think AI and stuff like that is only going to make it worse.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I guess it's a bit like second opinions. Do you see someone who's going to tell you what you want to hear or what you need to hear? And it all depends what you put in that Google or YouTube search about it. Will functional health cure my cancer? Yes, 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 yes. Can it is a very different search engine. So it's, yeah, a lot
Yep.
to do. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Any final words before we wrap this up?
I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
Yeah.
You know, again, you know, I'm not at all trying to claim I'm an expert
No.
in functional medicine in its best form of I
guess supportive care, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, but like I say, I return to my initial message that I think the core tenets of functional medicine in its best sort of sense is fundamentally the center of medicine. You know,
Yeah.
it is just good medicine, and there are good doctors out there. There are bad doctors. I'm not going to excuse bad doctors, but I think that the good massively outnumber the bad, and I think, you know, good doctors will consider all of these things. They are not exclusive to functional medicine at all.
No. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Rohin. And
Thanks so much.
if you guys want us to do another one, let us know, and have a great evening. Thanks a
You too.
lot. Bye.
Bye then.